a magical presentation by him titled Keys to India, a multi-genre presentation along with some brilliant musicians, Krishna Kishore, a percussion maestro, Naveen Napier, a bass guitarist of eminence, and a guest star, Bharat Sundar, who joined him, a very popular Carnatic singer who was part of this effort, and also another talented young artist, Aditya Srinivasan. Whenever I want to think of any unique concept, the first person that comes to my mind is my very close friend, Anil Srinivasan. Not because he's just a wonderful artist, but he's a thinking mind. He always wants to propagate a lot of things in our music, take it forward, take it to the next generation. He's been contributing immensely beyond his own personal career in making sure that music today is presented in the right way to the next generation through his music. He's been addressing a lot of social issues and also reaching out to children. He's reached lakhs and lakhs of children through his effort in Rhapsody. He's a great pianist who has changed the idea of piano and classical music in India. He has been a trendsetter in that way. Of course, is well trained in Carnatic and Western classical. He is also a composer of acclaim, a, a collaborator. He has worked with many musicians, integrated music into the journey of life. He has got a business management degree as well to go with it. And he has a perfect sense and balance of wanting to serve the community through music. And through this effort, I think we have all benefited immensely. I have been associated with him for close to 15 years now. And whenever I think of him, he has been one of the torchbearers of Carnatic music through a very revolutionary process in organically introducing the piano into the classical system. It's very difficult. The first question that I'm going to ask him is it should have been immensely difficult for him to be a path breaker. I know that, in 1902, I've heard a recording by Mani on the piano. And, from then on, we have never had anybody play this instrument in concert format. So when you came in, you would have had lots and lots of hurdles to get in and break into the classical system of Carnatic music. And then from there, you have not only taken Carnatic music forward, but you have also collaborated with so many artists and taken Indian music as a total presentation forward globally. So I would like you to, elucidate a little bit about your experience and what you've gone through in your journey.
First of all, thank you, Shashi ji, my good friend and also a pathbreaker in his own right in so many multiple ways. I was just telling him before this began that even in the pandemic time, he has had the imagination and initiative to create the Sansar Sangeet Utsav. Carnatica always keeps coming up with innovative ideas to keep encouraging musicians. So first of all, kudos to you and the entire team at Carnatica for doing this. You use the term path breaker. So whenever you want to break something, it's always going to be hard. That's where I will start, right? So you need to literally have a hammer, and you need to also steel your mind to be able to sort of cross hurdles. And it has not been easy. In fact, you have been a friend, Shashi, in even in all my moments of self-doubt. I know I have turned to you many times. Because it can get quite exasperating because you're trying something, very unusual, very unique. But I have always looked at it this way: you don't choose an instrument; the instrument chooses you. You know, so உங்க அண்ணா கேஸ்ல இருந்தும் அப்படிதான் எல்லாம். I mean, all of us, you know, we were you were born that way. You know, music chose us in a certain sense, and I mean it in a very humble way, in the sense that you know, I feel that music is a responsibility. You know, you don't இப்பெல்லாம் வந்து parents coming and saying I want to help my child choose an instrument, and I keep saying it's not a toy in a toy store. You know, it's a responsibility. The instrument has to speak to you. You know, and there needs to be a resonance between the instrument and yourself. And so in that sense, I don't think I had a choice. The piano, you know, I've been playing since I was 3. And அந்த வயசுல வந்து உங்க அண்ணா மாதிரி தான் I keep thinking of your brother. And what you know, there's no conscious deliberation இதுதான் பண்ணணும் அதுதான் பண்ணணும்னு. அது என்னமோ ஒரு certain frequency has resonated to ourselves, and நம்ம அறியாம அதுல பூந்திருக்கோம். அந்த மாதிரி வந்து இந்த இன்ஸ்ட்ருமெண்ட்டை வந்து கர்நாடிக் மியூசிக் ஈக்குவலி, யூனோ, ஐ வாஸ் born into a family that is steeped into Carnatic music. And you know, my father used to tease us even when we were children. அவர் திடீர்னு வந்து he'll sing first line of a kriti and கரெக்டாக ராகம் சொல்லணும் அப்படின்னு. I remember playing all these kinds of games when I was 4 and 5, and can be quite terrifying also. You know, அவர் வேணும்ட்டே he will choose Gauli Pantu and things like that. You know, where you can easily go wrong if you're a child. And so it never ever came to me as a thought that you could not play Carnatic music on the piano. I have never thought that way, you know. So even when we were 6 and 7, you know, as cousins, you know who my cousin is, and you know, we all used to play veetla vasikaricha kuda. I mean, somebody would be, my mother was learning from Suguna Purushothaman, my father was a student of Panchapakesayar, and you know, the very author of Ganamrita Bodhini and all these kinds of texts. So they would start with the Navaraga Malika, and I would be asked to play the successive phrase. And இதெல்லாம் பியானோலயே வாசிக்கிற மாதிரி தான் I've grown up like that. So I think when it came to you know, bringing it into the mainstream attention of classical music, I am blessed to have had parents and a family which never thought that it is impossible. And I think that's a very important factor. And I know, Shashi, you also reach out to a lot of youngsters across the states and many other countries. I think one of the biggest assets that a child can receive is the confidence of the parent. I think that is an extremely important factor in our development, and that is what we turn to when even when things go tough or things go rough. It is that childhood confidence that is instilled which is going to take you further. So you know, that would be my answer to this.
The other thing that I wanted to talk to you was about you know, you started collaborating with several artists, you know, which includes artists like Guru Charan, for instance. And that became a sensational production when you started creating something with him, where, you know, people were used to violin with vocal music. So suddenly, you know, bringing in piano into blending so seamlessly into his style of singing. And then later on, you worked with not just Carnatic musicians, but you worked with very, very popular musicians from the film industry, to name even legends like S.P. Balasubramaniam and several other great maestros. And alongside, you know, you've kept experimenting, but at the same time exploring different facets of creating something like an Indian music as a total full-fledged presentation of multi-genres in Indian music. So how did you really think of doing that in terms of, because it would have been very easy for you to play a lot of, everybody would expect you to play a lot of, in fact, there aren't many great pianists here in India who are regularly performing even Western classical on stage. So how did you think of doing this?
So I think the best music happens when you don't think about it, and I really believe in that. You know, For example, since you mentioned the late great SPB, and I will just say that, for example, about 15 years ago, I was called to play with him in a live concert in Chennai. And I think, I'm very happy that, first of all, he was, apart from being a legendary musician and a great person, it's also very fun and very experimental, and even during the rehearsals, I remember we were just essaying across Mohammad Rafi and Raja and Nadula or Carnatic Padina. So, I mean, he was also very fond of, just sort of having a conversation in music as opposed to being very set in stone about what he likes to do. And this is one thing I will say about, and in my own humble way, I want to say this. The greatest people I have worked with, from Carnatic stalwarts to Hindustani musicians to film personalities, the best people have always been experimental. The best people have always been open to experimentation, open to ideas, conversations, and want to have fun. And I don't find them being serious, in that sense. Meaning that they and the music, it's just inside them. And, they're totally open to having a very fun start, and once you understand that vibration and resonance, it's very easy to start working with them. Another thing I think which has greatly helped me, and I think, is that I have never considered myself a very good musician, Shashi. This is the actual truth. I still consider myself, I would say, a person still in learning, work in progress.
We all don't buy that.
No, but still, no, I don't think so, and I honestly don't think so. And I mean, whether it's been Gurucharan, for example, Gurucharan, as you all know, apart from being a collaborator, he and I are best friends, and we talk to each other almost every day. And with Charan, for example, I'm just so in awe of the beauty of his voice, for example, the malleability of that voice, the vallinam mellinam that comes out of that voice, that எனக்கு மனசுல அது வந்து ஒரு டெக்ஸ்சரா தான் ஓடுறது. It's sort of like, how do you wrap yourself around that texture so that அதை இன்னும் ஷைன் பண்ணணும்னு. Early in the game, I remember saying that the piano should be like a frame around the painting, and when you all perform great Carnatic music, or SPB is singing, was singing, I still can't get used to the past tense anyway, SPB was singing fabulous film music. I saw that as the painting, and I always saw myself as the frame around the painting, and I think it's a very important distinction to remember. I'm not trying to compete with the painting. I think the role that I play is to frame it in a very different way. And when the frame is beautiful, it can sit on a wall also very beautifully. It reflects the painting beautifully. So on the role நம்ம புரிஞ்சுக்கணும். And in a Indian cricket team, since I know you would have definitely been watching today, Rohit Sharma has a very different role to play, compared to Kohli, and compared to what a Butler is doing for England. I mean, each person has a particular role, and you need to understand your role in that concert. And I specifically remember, Shashi, you had brought me together with Sanjeev Abhyankar for the Bharat Sangeet Utsav some years ago. And I met him for the very first time in the backstage, and I was terrified, right? Because here is a Hindustani vocalist of tremendous repute, and but I cracked a joke. I remember this. I cracked some joke, and he responded to that joke, and we just gave ourselves a high five, and then we were off. So I find that, and I learned to joke crack panla. On the nimishathla thonithu. And I think when people see that you are a human being, right, and that you are simple, and you are also, happy to have a sense of humor, a sense of camaraderie, people respond to that, And I think great music comes from first becoming great friends. I think you need to establish that human connect. If you get along with that person, automatically you start watching out for each other on stage, and the music comes out very beautifully. And when people realize that what you're really trying to do is to give that frame to that painting, they become very comfortable. They become extremely comfortable with, there's no inhibitions after that, you don't hold back and things like that. And this is also to tell you, without naming names, there have been experiments that have gone wrong. I mean, it's not that it's always worked out. And rather than blame one another, I would say, see, sometimes அதே வேவ்லென்த்ல வந்து மனுஷா கிடைக்க மாட்டான். I mean, sometimes people are in a different wavelength. They could be having a bad day, they probably had a bad experience with something else. Sound can go wrong, this much better than I do. many things can go wrong, and those are days when you don't give up your best. So I think if we learn to be simple about who we are, and we learn to be humble about who we are, and enjoy having a banter, having the kind of conversation that I'm having with you, the music will automatically follow. I think you shouldn't overthink it. Just surrender to the process and let it happen.
That's great. I'm going to ask you a slightly different kind of a question. So we know that the Western classical world is more built on harmony and chords and parts, right? So, but whereas Carnatic music is more melody driven, the system itself is melody driven. Now, to many of our scales don't go with the Western chords directly. So it'll be clashing with the chords that we play. And so when we are doing some experiment like this, that would have been one important challenge that you would have faced. So would you be able to express that to our audience worldwide?
Sure.
Because
So
I think a lot of people think, when we do something like this, they think it's fusion.
yeah.
But I would like to say that it's not fusion. What you're doing is collaboration, not just fusion.
No,
So
no. In
how do you
fact,
blend in seamlessly?
I've stopped worrying about that word. You call it what you want. A rose by any other name will smell just as sweet. அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு நான் விட்டுட்டேன் அப்ப. So, I don't know. For example, so we all know the scale of Nalina Kanti, and let us say that there's a certain vibration associated with Nalina Kanti. It is I always think of it as a very happy and melodious ragam. But supposing you take that ragam itself, now onnume chords e vasikale na kuda, if even when the shruti, the tanpura is playing, it is presenting a harmonic texture to that, because you always have சாப்பாசா ஓடிட்டே தான் இருக்கு பின்னாடி. ஸோ அப்படின்றது அது சாப்பாசா பின்னாடி ஓடிட்டு தான் இருக்கு. It is only when I start explicating it in terms of understanding certain. So I mean, if you get deeper and deeper into Carnatic music, you understand what the Moola Swaras are, you understand what the Chaya Swaras are. So for example, if I do அது மாறும்போது அங்க போறச்ச this chord automatically comes from the same resonance. All these things have come out of the very important swaras of the ragam itself. The swaras that make up the ragam automatically are, what shall I say, emanating certain frequencies which are bringing this. If I were to play kapi or something like that, so அந்த மாதிரி ராகத்துல because of the sort of the vivadi kind of notes that you have, many chord progressions are adangified in that. In fact, I think that the harmony in Carnatic music is already there, right? You just need to pick it out. Your brother has done that work with Mel harmony, for example. Harmonyங்கிறது உள்ள இருக்கு, அது இல்லாம இல்ல. It is just that we are explicating only one particular frequency of it. But when you draw it out, if I do the Van Gogh painting, when he describes painting, he says, what do you see when you see the sky? And somebody says, I see blue. He says, do you only see blue? And then when you start looking closer and closer, you can find green, you can find violet, you can find purple, you can find indigo, you can find all the colors of the rainbow. Even in ஒரு cloud பார்த்தா கூட அதுல அத்தனை colors அடங்கி இருக்கு, right? அதே மாதிரி இந்த அப்படிங்கிற அந்த phrase-ல I am hearing, right, the frequencies of அத்தனையும் அடங்கி இருக்கு. And if I actually consider this particular harmonic progression is perfect classical harmony from Western classical music. It's already there. அது வந்து it is the என்ன சொல்றது, ஒரு if you put a single ray of light through a prism, it will refract and give you all the colors of the rainbow மாதிரி. And the melodic line வந்து when you put it through this frame, right, again I'm using the word frame, you can actually, if you listen carefully, அதுக்குள்ள இருக்கிற அத்தனை ஸ்வரங்களும் நமக்கு வந்து தென்படும், அது வந்து நமக்கு தெரியும். அதை வச்சுட்டு தான் you construct the harmony. I know it sounds very sort of philosophical. It is not actually. The closer you start listening to music, I think very few of us actually listen to the music. And I've tried this as an experiment also, right? If somebody were to sing Ramanannu bro vara அப்படின்னு பாடுறதுக்குள்ளேயும் the audience is already going into Ramanannu ரெண்டாவது லைனுக்கு போயிட்டா already. Okay, they're not listening to the end of the sentence, right? So if you actually stop, listen to the phrase as it is being savored, the other notes, the other frequencies that are identified in that will start becoming visible to you, and I am drawing the harmony only out of that, right? Which is why it goes with the music that it is going with, right? And Carnatic music, the greatness of it is வேலியே கிடையாது. There is no fence to it. The more you discover, the more there is to discover. You keep on learning. And I always feel, even though people say this in speeches, நமக்கு தெரிஞ்சது இத்துணுண்டு, தெரியாதது தான் ஜாஸ்தி இருக்கு. And people start fighting about the small thing that they know. கை அளவுக்கு தெரிஞ்சதுக்கு we are fighting and saying இது தப்பு, அது கரெக்ட். கர்நாடிக் இது தப்பு கிடையாது, அபஸ்வரங்கிறது ஒண்டி தான் தப்பு, right? So only if you're going off key is it a mistake. Otherwise it's not a mistake. You're discovering something new. I mean, you I think know this better than me, like Balamurli ji, மத்தியமாவத்தில வந்து பிரதிமதிமம் பாடினாக்க சரி பிரதிமதிமாவத்தி புதுசா இன்னைக்கு ஒன்று படிட்டோம் அப்படிங்கிறாரு. அந்த மாதிரி you're always discovering something new. And to me it is a misnomer to say harmony is not there. It is very much there. It is just that in Carnatic music it is latent, in Western music it is more obvious. அவ்வளவுதான் வித்தியாசம்.
I would also like our audience, I know that you play a lot of, you are fond of a lot of bringing in a lot of new composers, also to introduce new composers in the Western arena to the Indian audience. So when you have done that, can you play and show something for our global audience on some of the great composers that you have come up with? I know you do a lot of presentations to educate Indian musicians and Indian students, music students, on Western classical as well. So I wanted to bring in that sphere in a very brief way.
So, I mean, apart from the Bach, Beethoven and Mozart that everybody is fixated about in Western classical music, of course there's a host of other composers. Specifically when I look at things like jazz, I wanted to talk about it. நிறைய பேர் வந்து நினைச்சிட்டு இருக்கா ஜாஸும் கர்நாடிக் மியூசிக்கும் ரொம்ப சிமிலர் அப்படின்னு. That is almost like saying Chennai and Chicago are very similar because the spelling starts with the same two letters ன்ற மாதிரி அது. It's like there's a misnomer there. I mean, every genre has its own beauty, but of course if you look closely you can start finding things that can resonate with the other, but not quite the same. One of the things is the way people do improvisation in jazz. It is not the same as Carnatic Naraval or say Carnatic Swaraprastaram or something. It's very different from that. But the idea, the intention is how much can you play within that particular line. அது வந்து நம்ம நரவல் பண்ற மாதிரி தான் இருக்கும். So one of my favorite composers in jazz is Duke Ellington. So there's, for example, there's a composition that goes அப்படின்னு போகும். பட் அந்த காம்போசிஷனோட, ஸோ as you can see, jazz harmony itself is very different from classical harmony. அது வந்து ஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் பேட்டர்னில் போகிறது கிடையாது, நிறைய சிங்கப்பேஷன் இருக்கும், the rhythm keeps shifting this way that way. But typically in a concert, if I was going to do that, I would do நம்ம வந்து எப்படி வந்து ஒரு சங்கதி ஆட் பண்றோம், ஆட் பண்ணி திருப்பி we come back to the same line. Typically we would do the same thing in a Duke Ellington as well, and Duke Ellington will actually encourage it. So if you actually look at jazz score sheet versus a Western classical score sheet, Western classical score sheet is the exact note that you have to play, the exact dynamic that you have to play, and the exact speed at which you have to play, everything is written by the composer. 16 பேஜ் இருக்கும், 25 பேஜ் இருக்கும், right, which you have to commit to memory. Jazzல வந்து ஒரே பேஜ்ல தான் இருக்கும். It is just almost like a code sheet that you're given. This is the basic melody, you do what you want. அப்படின்றது தான் ஐடியா, right? Which is very, so when you look at it from a very structured point of view, that is where our system radically helped. What is helping me in improvise in jazz is my training in Carnatic music, right? What is helping me improvise on stage when I'm playing a tanam with a jayanti or a charan is because I've been exposed to jazz. So to that extent, there is a certain similarity that you can draw on in terms of, you know, என்னென்ன kind of improvisational ideas கொண்டு வரலாம் அப்படிங்கிறது. I want to mention actually a concert that Chitraveena Sri Ravikiran and I did, I don't know, must have been 15 years ago, with Eli Yamin and that jazz orchestra which we presented in Chennai, and Chennai and somewhere else, I forget now. And you know, the exciting part of the concert was where we were getting into improvisations, and ava vandu jazz improvisations vaastinde irundha, and we were sort of keeping pace with the Carnatic Naraval Swaram, and at some point we did not plan it, adu update just sort of came together, you know, in fact including a korappu and all that. So even in jazz you have vamping where you know come to an idea of something very similar to a korappu, you know. So you know, those kinds of ideas were very exciting, right, when you start bringing that together. In the madri, it's not just composers, Shashi, but even compositional styles, compositional formats, right? The sonata form is something that is divided into 3 or 4 movements, where each movement represents a certain mode but within the same composition. When you start thinking about it, it suddenly strikes you, hey, this is like Ragam Tanam Pallavi, you know. It's you know, you start seeing that's exactly the same thing. And for Ragam Tanam na Naraval panna poren, Swaram panna poren, Pallavi pada poren, you know. So it is very very it's like, hey, we've got that too, you know. So you start thinking even at structural similarity of forms, you will start finding a lot of comparatives that make it very easy for us to start understanding both kind of forms. That, I mean, my happiness is in being able to explore. What a blessing to be, you know, have been educated that way, that I can keep discovering these things. That's all I will say.
It was wonderful hearing that. I just wanted, you know, a lot of our global musicians who are all part of this festival to know what kind of work goes in your presentations and how you've been working. Also, I wanted to ask you before we conclude one last question, which is, I mean, of course, I would love to go on since we have other scheduled programs. I would like to ask you that, you know, you've been working on a lot of social causes, for a lot of social causes, and also propagating music to children, you know, several children through your Rhapsody. And the causes, like, you know, you've been working for the blind, you work for all the calamities, natural calamities, you work for different other, you know, social causes, which is very difficult for me to enlist in the session, but we'll have another session for that. But if you can just briefly say how music has become a vehicle for you to express all this.
So I quoted Duke Ellington in my last answer, and Duke Ellington makes a very lovely quotation. He says there are only 2 kinds of music in the world, the good kind and the other kind. He doesn't even say bad, he says the other kind. Okay, and you can only humbly hope that whatever you're doing is the good kind of dinner. But when you create good kind of music, or at least aspirationally create good kind of music, I think music makes you very sensitive to human condition. It makes you very sensitive to your circumstances, your surroundings. We are all essentially very sensitive people, right? And when you're sensitive, you also become very much more empathetic. It's very difficult to ignore social condition. It's very difficult to ignore problems. I think the more deeper you get into music, the more humane you become. I've always believed that, and I don't think I went into any sort of philanthropy with this idea that I should become a philanthropist. I think it is natural. If somebody is suffering, if you are in a position to help, you should help, right? And I think that way, like, just like I keep saying, music found me. I would say that many causes found me. So since you mentioned the blind, about 3-4 years ago, the Jnanadarshan Seva Home for visually challenged women in Chennai approached me for a donation. And I used to, now, I just gave money, but when my father passed away in 2018, I decided to make a visit to the home to see the condition to see if I could do something more in his name. And only when I visited the home physically, your empathy factor automatically shoots up by 200%, and you start saying, oh gosh, I should help in this, I should help in this, I should help in that. And you start finding many things in which you can make yourself useful. And lo and behold, I have become the patron trustee of that home, and every year, including during the pandemic year, I've been managing to raise money for them, and continuing to work with them also in terms of rehabilitation and things like that. When the floods happened, well, you were as active as I was. You're no exception to that. And I don't think any of us did that with the intention of saying, because of this, people will see me as a philanthropist. I think when you are a musician, you are given a platform. Other people come and listen to you on that platform, whether it's a concert stage or a interaction like this. There are other people listening in, right? Why not use this platform to spread love instead of spreading hate, right? So rather than you and me discussing politics and who I'm going to vote for, it makes much more sense to say, okay, who else can we help through this, right? And it is in that spirit that I think I've gotten associated with multiple things. I'm not usually a person who talks about what I do in that. It's uncomfortable for me. But my team and I estimated that in the last 4 years, Shashi, I have raised 13.5 crores for charity. I don't know if it's a bad amount or a good amount. I think it's a sizable amount for a piano player to do. So I'm very happy about that.
It's a lot that you've been doing, not just in terms of the equating it to the monetary benefits that you've given to the community, but your time, your effort, your passion, your love for spreading good things through your music, caring for the society most foremost, and beyond all, the sense of spreading love through music. So this is all very inspiring, and that is our one of the true inspirers for many. My very good friend, Kalai Mamani now, Anil Srinivasan. We just heard a beautiful presentation, the keys on the keys to India. This is a presentation that he and his friends exclusively created for this occasion. And I would like to sincerely thank the kind of selection that they brought in, the variety they brought in, and showcased the best of Indian music through to the global uh, world. And at the same time, also, showed how seamlessly it can blend into any other system without hassles. So, looking forward to much more sessions with my friend Anil Srinivasan. Sincere thanks from the Sansar Sangeet Utsav team to you once again for your beautiful concert and this lovely interaction with you. It's
My
always a pleasure
pleasure.
to meet you. Thank
My
you.
pleasure, Shashi, and the entire team of Carnatica and Sansar Sangeet Utsav. Very good luck to the remaining programs. And please continue to spread the spirit of music everywhere that you go, that you always do, and you always have my support for that.
Thanks.
Thank you.